October 1964, Dallas County, Alabama. A courthouse square in Selma, on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before the general election. John Wayne is in Alabama because a producer he knows is scouting locations for a picture that may or may not get made, and Wayne has come along because he likes to see the country and because sitting in Los Angeles waiting on other people's decisions has never suited him. He is 57 years old, in a plain gray work shirt with the sleeves rolled and a tan Stetson that has seen a lot of weather, and he has been driving since early morning with no particular schedule. He turns onto the courthouse square at 9:30 and sees the line. He parks the car. He gets out. He stands on the sidewalk and looks at what he is looking at. Here is the story. The square is the center of Selma the way courthouse squares are the center of every county seat in the South, the buildings around it, the oak trees at the corners, the statue of a Confederate soldier on a stone base facing north with the same expression such statues always have. Wayne has seen 100 squares like this one across 30 years of driving through the South on his way to locations and through towns between them. He knows what they look like and he knows what they mean, and he has never stopped long enough to reckon with either. He is stopping now. The line runs down the courthouse steps and along the sidewalk and turns the corner at the base of the building and keeps going. Wayne walks along it slowly, the way a man walks when he is trying to understand something. The line is made up almost entirely of black men and women, many of them older, many of them in their Sunday clothes, standing in the October heat with their documents in their hands. At the top of the steps, a folding table. A white official in a short-sleeved shirt and a tie that does not quite reach his belt. A ledger, a stamp, a ballpoint pen. Wayne watches from the sidewalk. He watches a white voter reach the top of the steps and go inside and come out 8 minutes later. He watches a black voter reach the top of the steps and get turned back. He watches it happen again. He puts his hands in his pockets and watches it happen a third time, and his jaw works side to side the way a man's jaw works when he is deciding something. He has been in Alabama 2 days and he has not been blind to what Alabama is in October 1964. He has seen the signs on the bathroom doors and the water fountains. He has heard the way certain conversations stop when certain people walk into a room. He has driven past churches with boarded windows and not asked why, because he already knows why, and knowing and doing something about knowing are two different things, and he has spent most of his life on the wrong side of that distance. He is standing on a sidewalk in Selma now, and the distance is right in front of him and he is deciding what to do with it. Then he sees the woman on the steps. She is near the top, third step from the table. 70 years old at least, maybe more. Dark blue church dress, white collar. A jar of water in one hand. A pocketbook over her arm. She has the posture of a woman who decided a long time ago that she was not going to let anything bend her and has kept that decision every day since. Wayne watches her step up to the table. He watches the official, a man named Roy Tatum, look at her papers. He watches Tatum write something in his ledger and look up and say something to her. He cannot hear the words from where he stands, but he can read the shape of the exchange, and he has read that shape before and knows exactly what it means. He watches her pick up her papers from the table and turn and start back down the steps. Wayne is moving before she reaches the third step. He crosses the sidewalk and goes up the courthouse steps at a pace that is not hurrying but is not stopping either. He comes up beside her on the third step and puts his hand under her left elbow. Not grabbing, not pulling, just there. She stops and looks at him. She is a woman who has spent a long life deciding carefully whom to trust, and she makes this decision in about 3 seconds, which tells Wayne something about her. He says, "Let's go back up." She looks at him for a moment. She says, "They won't process it." He says, "Let's find out." She looks at him a second longer. Then she turns and they walk back up together. The line on the steps goes quiet as they climb. Not a sudden quiet, a settling quiet. The kind that moves through a crowd when something is happening that people want to see and do not want to interrupt. Wayne is 6'4" and broad across the shoulders, and the tan Stetson adds another 2 inches, and there is something in the way he is walking, unhurried, chin level, that makes the steps feel like they belong to him without his having to say so. The woman beside him walks with her chin level too. They reach the top together. Roy Tatum looks up from his ledger. He sees the woman. He sees the man beside her. Something moves across his face, not recognition exactly, not yet, but the beginning of the understanding that something has changed. He opens his mouth. Wayne gets there first. He puts both hands flat on the folding table and leans forward. Not over Tatum, not threatening, just present, the way a very large man is present when he decides to stop keeping his say to himself. He says, "This woman has been in your line since before 7 this morning. She has her registration card. She has her prior application. She has her late husband's discharge papers from the United States Army." He straightens up and looks at Tatum and says, "You're going to process her application right now?" Tatum says, "Sir, there is a procedural issue with her prior registration that." Wayne says, "There isn't." 2 words, no volume. The kind of quiet that is louder than shouting because it does not leave room for an answer. Tatum looks at him. Wayne looks back. The line on the steps is absolutely still. A woman 2 steps below has her hand pressed to her mouth. A man at the bottom of the steps has taken his hat off without knowing he has done it. Tatum looks down at the ledger. He looks at his pen. He picks it up. He asks the woman her name. His voice has gone flat in the way a voice goes flat when the man using it has run out of choices. She gives her name. Cora Mae Broadnax. She gives her address, her date of birth. Tatum writes. He stamps the form. He dates it. He slides the receipt across the table without looking up. Cora Mae Broadnax picks up the receipt. She looks at it. Her name. Her address. The date, stamped in blue ink. She has been trying to get this piece of paper since 1940. She folds it once and puts it in her pocketbook beside her husband's discharge papers, and she does not say a word to Roy Tatum because Roy Tatum has ceased to be relevant. Wayne straightens up from the table. He looks at Tatum for one more second, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the steady flat look of a man confirming that something is finished. Tatum does not look up from his ledger. The pen in his hand is not moving. The line on the steps behind them has started breathing again. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. They walk back down the steps together, Wayne and Cora Mae Broadnax, and the line watches them come down and nobody says anything because there is nothing to say that would add to what just happened. At the bottom of the steps, Wayne offers his arm and she takes it, and they walk to the shade of an oak tree at the edge of the courthouse square. She says, "I know who you are." He says, "I figured you might." She says, "My son drove to Montgomery to see your pictures. They wouldn't show them in Selma." He says, "Your son has good taste." She looks at her pocketbook for a moment. She says, "My husband James served in the First War. Came home in 1919. Never once voted." Wayne is quiet. She says, "I tried 4 times before today. Poll tax, literacy test. Man at the door who said the office was closed." He says, "How long ago was the first time?" She says, 1940. He looks at her. 24 years, he says. She says, 24 years. Wayne takes off his Stetson and holds it in both hands and looks at the courthouse. His jaw tightens once and then releases. He says, "James earned this for you a long time ago. Overdue doesn't cover it." She watches him put his hat back on. She says, "What you just did up there?" He shakes his head slightly. He says, "I walked up some steps with you. You did the same thing you've been doing for 24 years. You showed up." She looks at him for a long moment. She says, "I'm going to vote in 3 weeks." He says, "I know you will." She says, "And every time after that." He says, "I know that too." She straightens and adjusts her pocketbook strap and says she has to get back, her daughter is waiting. He touches the brim of his Stetson. She walks away across the courthouse square in her church dress, straight-backed, her receipt in her pocketbook, and Wayne watches her go until she turns the corner and is gone. He stands in the shade of the oak tree for a while after she disappears. A few people on the sidewalk are looking at him now. He does not acknowledge it. One man, older, in work clothes, standing at the base of the steps, takes off his hat and holds it against his chest and looks at Wayne. Wayne looks back at him. The man nods once. Wayne nods once. Then he puts his hands in his pockets and walks back to his car and sits behind the wheel for a moment before he starts the engine, looking at the courthouse through the windshield, at the steps and the table and Roy Tatum still sitting there with his ledger, and at the line that is still moving in the way it has always moved, slowly for some and quickly for others, and he thinks about a woman in a church dress who tried 4 times over 24 years and showed up a 5th time anyway, and he starts the engine and pulls out onto the square and drives south. Cora Mae Broadnax voted on the 3rd of November, 1964. She arrived 45 minutes before the polling place opened and was the first person through the door. She voted in 1966. She voted in 1968. She voted in every election, local and federal, primary and general, for the rest of her life. She never missed one. In 1972 she drove her daughter Ruth to the polls when Ruth had a broken ankle. In 1980 she drove her son William when his truck was in the shop. In 1984 she drove two of her grandchildren to their first election and stood outside in the Alabama morning waiting for them and walked home with them after and did not say much because what she felt did not have words that were sufficient for it. John Wayne left Selma that afternoon and drove to Montgomery and flew back to Los Angeles the following morning. He was 57 years old and there was a long road still in front of him and a great many pictures still to make. He never told the story of the courthouse square to any reporter or in any interview or in any letter that has been found. What is known comes from Ruth Broadnax, Cora May's daughter, who wrote the account in a notebook in 1971 after her mother told it to her one evening on the porch. Ruth was a third-grade teacher and she wrote the way a teacher writes when something needs to be kept exactly right, carefully, from the beginning, without leaving anything out. Ruth's notebook says that Wayne's hand was under Cora May's elbow before Cora May had taken 3 steps down from the table. It says he did not announce himself, did not ask permission, did not explain what he was doing. He simply appeared beside her on the step and put his hand where it needed to be and waited to see what she would decide. It says Cora May told her she knew in the first second that the hand was not going to let go until she decided to go back up, and she knew in the second that the decision was hers and not his, and she made it in the third second. Ruth wrote, "Mama said she had been turned away 4 times by men who would not look at her. She said this was the first time anyone had ever come down the steps to meet her." In 2008, Cora May Broadnax was 94 years old. She had macular degeneration. Her left knee had been operated on twice. She could not drive. Her granddaughter drove her to the polling place on a Tuesday morning in November. The poll worker helped her to the booth. She voted, she came out and her granddaughter was crying and Cora May told her to stop because there was nothing to cry about. She said, "This is how it was always supposed to be. This is just how it was always supposed to be." She died in March 2009 at the age of 95. She had voted in every election for 44 years without missing once. Local, federal, primary, general. School board elections that most people in Dallas County did not bother with. Runoffs in odd years when the turnout was thin and the polling places were half-staffed. She voted in all of them. Her granddaughter said that in her last years, when the knee was bad and the eyes were worse, the only appointment she never canceled was Election Day. Her daughter Ruth donated the notebook to the National Voting Rights Museum in Selma in 2010. It is in the archive. The entry is 3 pages in Ruth's careful handwriting. At the bottom of the 3rd page, below the full account, Ruth added one line. It says, "Mama said his hand was steady the whole time. She said that was how she knew." The courthouse is still there. The oak tree in the square is still there. The steps are the same steps. The Edmund Pettus Bridge is 4 blocks away and every year in March people walk across it to remember what happened in 1965. Some of them pass the courthouse on the way. Most of them do not know what happened on those steps 6 months before the bridge. Most things that matter happen somewhere that does not have a marker yet. If this story reached you, do me a favor, pass it on. Share it with a veteran in your life. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. There are more Duke stories coming.